Foul is Fair, Chapter 32, Pre-Halloween. When Megan walked in Friday after school, the traditional Kahale pre-Halloween was already underway. Mac had halfway completed a hard hat made entirely out of Legos. Justin sat on the bed in some of Mrs. Kahale's gardening clothes. They and some hand-me-downs from Kasha made up his entire modern wardrobe so far. Megan could see why he preferred the gardening clothes to the "Let's do something wrong" t-shirt. The chainmail was in the closet, and the sheath of the Sword of Light was hung neatly on one of Mac's brightly colored plastic coat hooks. Thankfully, when they went back, he'd be able to wear the chainmail. She gave Lonnie a brief hug, then sat down next to Justin and let Lonnie get back to work on her Firefly-inspired spaceship mechanic costume. Megan was well aware that the costume pieces Lonnie hadn't been able to find secondhand had been stitched over the course of the week. Her red cape and picnic basket were feeling a little inadequate, but she'd had other channels for her artistic leanings this week. Megan didn't do nearly as much with so little time as Lonnie did. "How are you adjusting?" she finally asked Justin. "Well enough. They've been trying to get me ready for school, but I'm uncertain how quickly that will proceed. There's no lack of things to do, though, especially while we try to save as much of the final crop as possible." "Final crop? So you've been introduced to the pumpkin mausoleum?" He grinned at the designation for Mrs. Kahale's garden. "There are some survivors. I think the radishes may be a lost cause, though. Perhaps they would be best left in their graves." "Not for lack of effort." "Certainly not. She puts in plenty of time. I'm just not quite certain how to tell her that she's a terrible gardener." "I think she'd be the first to agree with you," Lonnie said, taking a break in her preparations. "It doesn't really matter. That's not the point. It relaxes her, gives her something to do when not at work. And, well, we eat the survivors, so there's no witnesses." Megan laughed. "So what's it going to be this year when it gets too cold to salvage anything else from the killing fields?" "I don't know yet. She's mentioned poetry. She might try to spend more time battling the spinning wheel, or maybe the pottering wheel, or getting the two confused and making a mess." Justin looked back and forth between them quizzically. "Have you been down into the basement?" "With the wheel and the full furnace and all?" he asked. "Ah, good. So you did find the island of misfit vases. 2 of those are from when Lonnie and I were really little. The others, yeah, that's Mrs. K." "I'm not sure I understand. She seems so happy with these things, but they all turn out so badly." Lonnie grinned. "She's exceedingly happy to be gardening or playing with her pottery wheel or baking. Fortunately, the 14th century seems to have produced iron stomachs." "Chocolate is weird," Justin said simply. "By most people's standards, you still haven't eaten chocolate yet. But anyway, enjoying her collection is the whole point. Mom works hard. She's a very good office manager. It's a nice, boring break away from living with a fairy and 2.5 fairies. When she gets home, she can indulge in something fun, and no one, most especially herself, cares if she's any good at it." "Collection?" Justin asked. "There's collected sickly plants and collected malformed pottery, and you haven't seen her photography or heard her poetry. You weren't around when she accidentally shaped the rock garden into an obscene gesture. Mom collects hobbies." Justin still looked confused, but nodded his agreement. "I will do what I can to help save some of the gardening victims, then. We'll all be glad for the help. I couldn't help but notice you seem to know your way around growing things in general." "I helped some with that at home, yes, along with a lot of whatever else was needed. Tending the dogs and the horses, cleaning boots and armor, maintaining weapons, and general repairs. Though I will admit, your house is definitely not in need of any general repairs. Lack of dogs and horses, too. Don't mention those to Mac. Mom only recently convinced him that the cowboy telephone line repairman as a costume might be a little too complex for most people to recognize what he was. Thank goodness for Legos. And you're getting dressed up even though we're going to the dance instead of out to a party or something? Megan asked Lonnie. It doesn't matter what costume I wore. I'd still stand out a lot less than most things at the dance, and I enjoy it. I still think Justin's knight costume ought to win most accurate, though. I'm not a knight yet, Justin replied, and may never be. I'm definitely taking the armor back to Fairy, though. I'm guessing the Kahales were able to patch it up and replace the shield? Lonnie looked at Megan like she was crazy. Patch? We upgraded it, and his new shield is lighter and twice as durable. Justin nodded his agreement. Hey, even better. I'm just glad the armor did its job before. Some of those fights could have been a lot worse. Justin rolled his recently dislocated shoulder, as if to make sure it worked properly after the injuries. Thankfully, between time and the bits of Megan's healing, it seemed to be almost fully recovered. I think they were bad enough. We'll try for less bad this time, yeah. No more golems and no more explosions. Megan wished she could promise more than that, but it was a good place to start. The last I can't promise. I put the sword in the stone. I should try to recover it for you. That didn't exactly go well last time. So glad you didn't end up with third-degree burns from the fire or something. Justin shrugged. It didn't hurt. Oh, well, yeah. Fairy's weird sometimes about what doesn't hurt. Megan remembered the thorn vine that had scratched and the briar mail that hadn't. Lonnie glanced at the sword sheath. Sometimes. Or there may just be something about the sword and its sheath that protects the bearer. That is pretty intense flame close up. Okay, so maybe there's something to that. It's an awfully big risk, though. It's going to be guarded, even if you can stand the fire. That part no one had an answer for. The idea was good, but Megan couldn't think of any way to deal with whoever Orla had on watch, and despite the week to talk, the others hadn't come up with anything. The Count says the haunted house grapes don't taste anything remotely like eyeballs, Aisling said, instead of hello, as they landed on the windowsill. Megan didn't bother to ask where any of that line of comparison came from. For the moment, she went to the window to greet them. She was far too captivated by the appearance of Halloween. With the light starting to dim, what lights there were became more obvious. The fog machine of the people next door was turned on, and the clashing decorations all over the neighborhood were somehow just perfect. The mix of ghostly noises, canned screams, and maniacal laughter audible now that the window was open didn't hurt either. She was sure it was just going to be even louder and more perfect tomorrow. Her reverie was only broken when Lonnie put a hand on her shoulder. So you haven't gotten into your bag yet. What are you going as this year? I brought my Red Riding Hood cape from last year. But you're usually so into dressing up. Sure, but there didn't seem to be a lot of point this year. I'm not sure I want any of the candy they'd hand out in Fairy. This is the perfect time to dress up, Aisling chimed in. I kind of have to agree with her, Lonnie said. Weird as that sounds, we could use a little distraction. And this isn't really like you. Megan blinked, mind going back through some of her old costumes, all homemade since she was small, and often as much as art project as disguise. There was something that felt right about the comment. She just wasn't placing it. Maybe. I'll have to think about it. She draped the red cape over her shoulders and secured it, pulling the hood up while she pondered. Then, glancing down at the things she'd brought, she dug into the bag again. But I kind of want to think to music.